Visitors are not our friends. They've come to the planet to try to kill us.
It's pretty cool that they got them all here for this.
This is not science fiction.
You know what would be really awesome is if the actors should come out in costume. That would be hilarious.
That was Robert David, I know.
For the first time since 1984.
No, please. No, come on. We're here.
Okay, so just a quick few announcements. Firstly, really thank you for being here and your support of this panel, and certainly thank you for being fans of the Raw family here. We are also being governed at this panel by visitors, so please let's be cautious. No ripping of faces. I know, we're in this for fun, this is done. Okay, we're gonna open this up to questions pretty fast, and we'll announce our guests here in a moment. Just a few little rules, if you can. First, we're going to position, are we going to position on both sides here, or just one side? I think we're, okay. So both sides, and so you can go ahead and move and get into that line. If you like, you have questions, we'll open this up pretty fast to questions to give you opportunity to engage with our special guests. Let's try to keep things on topic. We were at the V panel, and we like to kind of discuss everything. We're all fans of V, and we all have things we want to learn, so let's keep it on topic. I know that we'll kind of talk about some of the other work, certainly things that they're doing now towards the end of the panel, but we just want to focus on V for this particular panel. Let's keep the questions, quickly moving. I know that we all love V, and we want to express how much we love V, but we
What
want to.
about if you're in a wheelchair and can't make it to the line?
I will bring a mic to you.
Thank you.
Did you have a question?
Yes, I do.
I'm going to have you give the question first.
Okay.
First question is right. So hold on to
I
that
just want to
question.
stump you.
My name is Daniel Griffith. I'm a documentary filmmaker. My company is Violet Motion Pictures. I, like you, have a huge fan of me. And those of you that came first, you got little buttons. That is compliments of me and Violet Motion Pictures. I just wanted to give you guys a little bit of that. Celebrate this and give you something to kind of take back home to show that you were here. So, without further ado, I'm going to announce our guests. Starting off with Willie himself, Robert England. Thank you very much for doing that. Our next guest is Diana Jane Michael. And last but certainly not least, Mark Singer. Again, speaking for everyone here, it is a great honor and a privilege to have you guys here with us today. So thank you so much for taking the
Good to be back.
Thank you.
What a crowd. Oh, hey! Boy, the resistance lives, huh?
Still, starting to meet you all here, I'd like to begin with just talking about your experience being at a con right now. I mean, just like, what is your experience like so far?
Well, I don't do very many conferences because I live all the way in Australia, and DragonCon asked me to come out here, and I'm just so excited to see all the fans and see how I've got to have people coming in from Miami and all sorts of places to meet me, and I don't know, it's very emotional, and it means a lot to me to connect with the fans, and also, I mean, my God, to be with these two boys. I don't think I've seen this gorgeous man since I think it's been 30 years. Wow. And Mark I've seen, of course, from time to time. But for us all to be united, I think it's a very big deal and it's very rare. So,
Mark and Jane have starred in a lot of television, and when you think back, our cast got along so well. Yeah. There's so many casts. There can be problems, but we all got along so well and made friendships. Of course, working on that miniseries, you shot you 20 hours a day.
I was saying to, speaking about 20 hours a day, the longest day, it's hard for me to sit down here, I'm going to pull this up a little bit. The longest day that I remember that we worked on that set was 22 hours. We put in some long hours on that, but the thing that was amazing about it was that we all felt that we actually were involved in an adventure, and the adventure was the making of the film. And in that way, art and life really did replicate themselves, because where the heroes and where the villainesses were constantly at work, and where the more innocent members were continually put upon. Oh my God, the things he had to go through.
Alien allergy test.
Yeah, the cast kept the same hours, so that was art and life mirroring itself, and it was a lot of fun. It was a great adventure.
Yeah. Also, and this is really relevant for the con, and you fans of special effects and fantasy and sci-fi, but we brought John Dykstra to television, and I think one of the things people forget is that before special effects were pretty cheesy on television, and we really elevated it.
Yeah.
Before it was like somebody in green makeup chasing William Shatner on a styrofoam planet, and we really raised the thing with the CGI, and the TV's never looked back since.
You can see the transition. You can see the transition in V. That was one of the questions we get asked a lot. Is what was one of the hallmarks of that kind of time in television filmmaking? And you can see the transition because we did exactly so. The CGI that we used was brand new, and the technology was very expensive. It was costly.
Yeah, we were an expensive show.
And so, I mean, every time a laser fired in those days, it was $1,000. So every time you went like that, that was 1,000, that was 1,000, that was 1,000. And so the bean counters upstairs were just checking it off, 1,000. While we were downstairs trying to make art, fun, craft. But meanwhile, all of the other sets in which you saw those huge spacecraft, 6 or 8 of them, in a big hangar-like thing, that was all practical. That was all real. Every one of those things existed.
You don't do that anymore, huh?
And they all had interiors. You could walk in and out of them, and there were control panels, and there were seats, or there were other things. So this was a blend. This was just when CGI was beginning to be introduced. And you can see it's an interesting transition thing when you look at the settings that V was in.
I think they're getting back to that more now too, Mark. I think the really good shows now blend CGI and practicals as opposed to just being all CGI because it looks too cartoony then.
Yep.
Oh, I'll never forget the day I walked into Warner Brothers. That's when I had just been cast in the miniseries, and I had just been doing daytime television at the time, soap operas. And suddenly, I go to the Warner Brothers lot and walk into this huge hangar, and there are these enormous spaceship. And I mean, it was just the most exciting, amazing experience.
So we'll open this up to questions. We actually have the first one that we'll actually go down. Is this working?
There it is.
Because while we're doing the microphone thing, because of that, because they were actually practical sets, not green screens with projections on them, all of the actors, all of the actresses, all of the actors were free to roam these sets and make up whatever kind of stunts and whatever kind of imaginative blocking or places to go to or scenes to set it in. And these we would bring to the directors or to the writers or to the producers, and we'd say, look, we want to go over here, we want to do this. Hey, look at this, here's something that I thought of at lunch one day. Watch this, what if we do this, what if we do that? And whatever you wanted to do, they said, go ahead and do it. And we had free reign to draw our own 3D comic book right there on the screen in front of everybody. And that was one of the really exciting things about it. Coming to work every day, man, if you could think of something exciting to do, it was going on film.
That hangar set, you know, with all the alien ships in it, was enormous. I think it was the largest sound stage at Warner's.
Yeah.
It's a famous stage, you know, in cinema history. But like Mark said, and Jane said, walking to that sound stage the first day, it really was magical. You really knew we were part of something special.
And just also to again kind of remind us of what time in filmmaking history this was. While we were filming V, John Wayne was on the Warner Brother lot filming scenes from The Shootist. And so this was a specific time in filmic history when a lot of the old guard was washing on out, and the new guard was coming in, and now the tide is flowing again. And so those lots are historic tide pools in which new life is always being regenerated, and the old seascape is changing. So it was an interesting.
Mark was the star of the show. I think he had a really cool parking place. I know I do. I think Mark's parking spot was real near Clint Eastwood's.
And that's
Well, I got better though.
and that's what acting is all about. All about the parking.
Okay.
Here's our first question here.
This question is for all three of you, but Mark, I think you got the best answer to this. What is going to happen now with the second generation of V? Are they going to go back and complete it, or what are they going to do?
It's funny that you sort of focus the question on me, when actually Robert was always the set historian. He knew every movie ever made. He knew who did the makeup, the special effects. It didn't matter what. And so maybe he actually would be a better person to talk
We were
about.
talking about this the other day, Mark. I owe a phone call. My wife's been corresponding email with Kenneth Johnson. But I guess there's a project in the works, is what I'm thinking with Kenneth. But I don't know the details because I've been on the road for a while, and I've missed them. I gotta go home and call Kenny and see what's up. But I really don't know any details. I wish I had some gossip. If anybody else does.
I do know that I eat breakfast with Kenny Johnson 2 or 3 times. 2 or 3 times a quarter. I'll use it that way. 2 or 3 times a quarter, and he is moving forward on some future iteration of V. I'm not sure what it is, but he comes very close. And then, as always, is the frustration in Hollywood. There might be a changing of the administrative guard, and so the project then gets moved away from the green light.
Yeah.
But he's really moving on it, so it's very possible we could see another remake, reboot.
Especially with all of the new streaming services.
Well, is it going to
So
be
many others.
continuing with where they had the second generation, and you brought the two
You're
together,
referring-
the first
yeah.
set and the second set, and you brought the administrative thing that in the last episode you were in, and you said they were going to come across, and that's when it completed itself.
I'm really not. I didn't quite hear all of that.
I think
but
she's referring to
Talking about the
the
TV
reiteration.
series?
Yes.
Oh, the reimagined, I came back.
Yes, the
Yeah.
reimagining.
No, that's over. Yeah. that got canned by the
Okay,
network.
because that was
You heard
supposed,
it.
okay,
I
sorry.
was in it, I know, you know.
I'm sorry,
Yeah,
Jane.
we're
I know,
talking
they
about-
killed me at the end, so I'm not too upset.
You're talking about the second B.
Yeah,
The
Right,
next
Next Generation.
Well, because, Mark, Jane was on it.
Yeah.
Mark was
Mark
on
was
it.
about to be on it.
But Mark was about to be on it, and I had heard the Jungle Drums in Hollywood. I'd even heard that they were thinking of having me come on
Yeah.
as like a homeless person. Like, really being homeless, which I actually thought was kind of interesting. And Mark, were you going to be FBI?
Yeah.
Or,
Yeah, that was-
You know, I don't really know, because my
They had you on last episode.
my complete attention in being involved in the second reboot of V was to drag it back into more of the original. So
Yeah.
I really didn't pay too close attention to that because I had my own agenda.
That was something that Joe Johnson was not involved in. I mean, this was an entirely different showrunner, and it had a different creative force behind it.
The other thing that's interesting I find about this is that here you have these incredible actors and actresses, and I'm fortunate to stand among them. The way I think about this is that one of the ways you can gauge the success of performances is when the writers begin to write to the characters,
Yeah.
to the players who play the characters, rather than the actors trying to figure out what the writers are doing. And these are the great exponents of that right here. It's good stuff.
Nice to meet you guys. Thanks for coming to con. And a friend of mine, we always have a few discussions about V and what coulda, shoulda, woulda. If you had a chance to pull the ending back about 4 more episodes, what would you have liked to see happen?
Well, one thing I know is there was a Bible for the continuing series before we got axed. They had to rewrite the last 3 or 4 shows because where they were taking the show, as I understood from various sources, the star child, Jennifer, the actress, was going to go over to the dark side, and that in fact Lydia would come and join the resistance. There was going to be like a swap almost. That was if we had continued.
That would have been.
They knew that Jennifer, I think when Jennifer was doing daytime, she was a bit of a villainous, a bit of a mean girl, and they knew she had this talent, so they had her be very innocent on the series, but they were slowly, I think there was 1 or 2 episodes before they started to rewrite for the cancellation, where you saw Jennifer's eyebrow arch up, and you knew, dum, something was happening. She was going to be tempted, and I thought that was actually fascinating, because we would be betrayed by
the
one of
third
our own.
miniseries you're talking about, or the?
No, I'm talking about our
The
series.
TV series.
The series, had it continued,
Right,
they were gonna have Jennifer go over to the dark side, to you.
yeah.
Yeah, and be like your
That would've
surrogate
been
daughter.
amazing.
Yeah.
Bring it back.
It would have also been that great,
Yeah.
the blonde and the brunette, and battling at loggerheads.
It's interesting that here we have that's an inside view of actors right there, is that these people are so invested in the creation of these characters that they see the multiple possibilities of where all of that storytelling can go. And in the broader scope of things, what it means if we parse it and look deeper into it, that is, again, it's the same issue, which is okay, it's interesting to switch this person with that person, and this person goes this way and this person, but what is at the core of it is who can you trust, and what kind of twist has been put upon society that people are no longer adherents to a specific ethic, but that they are now becoming a little more facile with what they believe is true or not. And so everybody begins to be suspicious of everybody else. It is indeed a brave new world. That's an interesting place to go, and something that makes that adds a kind of a chill to the tension, which is I think one of the distinguishing factors when we get to do a series like this is that we get to tell a metaphor about the larger sense of what happens to society when this kind of this kind of perversion of the best aspects of humanity takes over.
But it also echoes, Mark, it echoes that thing you were just saying about how the writers began really writing for us.
Yeah.
And some writers had favorites, you know.
Yeah.
You hoped you were a favorite. But someone had seen Jennifer's soap opera. And I remember hearing this, I think I heard it from Jeff Yeager, but they had seen Jennifer's soap opera, and she'd been playing real nasty. And they thought, my God, that would be great to pair her with Jane next season and have her go over, you know, and Jane would like lie to her or something about her alien roots. Your alien roots are showing, darling.
David, where would you have liked the series to go? Maybe your character, where would you have liked it to go if you had the
I
freedom?
think if it continued, I would have loved for there to be a vulnerability in my character. Like everyone has their Achilles heel, you know, that one thing that can destroy them. And I don't think that Diana got to show that. You know, maybe I don't know what that would be, but it was very much just evil. She was just evil. And I think if the series had continued to make her a little more multidimensional and for to have shown another side to her, would have been interesting for me to play as an actress.
There's another aspect of this also, which is that since then, technology has allowed us to send capsules from the Earth billions of miles out into space, where it turns around now. I saw a photograph of the Earth from out beyond Pluto, and it was a grain of sand among a wash of sand grains. And that whole concept of the size of the universe versus the pinch that we all live under here on the Earth, that whole thing could feature into the next one in a way that informs the story in ways that we can't even imagine right now. Because there's a whole new view of who we are, where we are, and what's out there. Even with the popularity of the show, Ancient Aliens and stuff like that, and Chariots of the Gods and stuff like that. There's a whole new way of looking at all of this, which I find very exciting.
Where there's water, there's life.
The next question here is, yes, you can stand up. Okay.
Good afternoon. V was one of the lovely shows and shows that I really enjoyed growing up. Partly because of what we considered a really controversial storyline, which was the unwed teenage girl, I'm forgetting her name, having a child by the alien. And then first of all, of course, for the time, her being unwed was, oh my God. But then it turned out to be an alien baby. So setting that up, what were some of the outrageous storylines as you got scripts as actors, as you were reading, you were going yourselves, oh my God, what are they giving me? Yeah, I'm interested to know that.
Well, certainly for me, I think when I read that I was going to be eating a rat. That came as a total surprise. I think that was the first time I realized that we actually ate rodents. I mean, that was the first time I found out we ate a rodent too. But I think we were constantly being surprised by things.
Must-see TV.
Yeah.
Jane Badler eats a mouse.
Well, you delivered.
I was in the operating room because I knew a little bit about alien anatomy, I presume. That's why they had me in that sequence. But, because I was sympathetic, they did a really interesting twist with me, which was the sort of alien allergy test. And Resistance was ready to sacrifice me to see what would hurt the lizard people. And that story is funny because you guys all know I was under makeup for 20 years after V, and that was my first experience with special effects makeup on V. They had me in the old, and this is what Mark was saying earlier, this is this historic lot, and this was before the new age of special effects makeup. And they had me on literally like a slab, like a coroner's slab in the old Warner Brothers makeup lab, which had literally done movies like Abbott and Costello and Frankenstein and stuff. And all the guys there had worked with Karloff and stuff. And they had these white lab coats. They looked sort of like German Volkswagen mechanics. But I was laying on that slab in that cold room under the AC for like 8 hours while they fit that to my skin, the reptile skin on top of mine. So that was just, for me, that was just the fanboy in me, like you guys. The childhood fanboy in me was like me getting to play with the makeup, for the first time. And so that was really a great adventure for me on the show.
And again, it goes, but isn't it interesting because they're willing to sacrifice you? It's an interesting storyline, and again, it puts that darker kind of tint on what otherwise would be a space adventure. You know what I mean? And that was the underlying value of the show, was the shadow side.
But you can see how desperate the resistance was getting. Because you guys were arguing that a lot in those episodes. The resistance was fighting amongst itself.
Well, your character, Robert, was kind of the gauge in the story of our tolerance as human beings to either an opposing force or a different race. It's something that is opposite of ourselves that we don't understand, and in the beginning we were afraid of, and certainly we deserve it. As we discover their reasons for being there, we become justified in our fears. But your character is kind of the gauge of the possibility of a kind of symbiotic relationship, that there are some out there that do not believe the same way, and that was an interesting.
Well, there's several metaphors at work here. One was Kenny's original story was the occupation of Europe by the Germans, and he didn't sell that, so he made it the occupation of Earth by aliens, and we were able to apply many things that occurred in Europe during World War II. But the other thing was, and I can't remember the word, it begins with a P, it was hard to pronounce, but they introduced in the series, remember, a kind of, that there was maybe an alien Christianity. Remember that? Pretinama. And I know that they were going to play with that with June Chadwick's character if the series had continued, and also with Jennifer, the star child. And Willie knew about that too. Willie was privy to that too, which was part of his connection, I think, to the star child.
We have a question over here. Hey, hi. Longtime fan, first time commenter. First, you guys are responsible, the show's responsible for my best friends in the whole wide world. We were all nerds at the same time and love the show, so thank you so much for giving me lifelong friends. Second, one thing that I've always admired and loved about a certain segment of the original miniseries is that Diana and Brian, I think, and Steven, all with these long stares at certain characters after they finished talking and turned to look away. Now, what was your direction there? Was it to imply that the visitors had some kind of mind control that they were trying to project upon the humans? Or was it just this creepy thing that we thought would look really cool?
I think it was just Jane's contract. She gets more time in close-ups than the rest of us.
That looks good. Now, are you talking about the long stares that after the scene was over, we continued to do?
Yes, you would talk to them, they'd turn away, and you'd keep staring at them like you were just going to eat them with fire.
For another 2 seconds,
Yeah.
Well, that was a couple of things. I think that was the time, the era. I mean, I think things were shot more that way at that time in television. And I also think that Kenny, whereas Mark's experience was one of playing and having a lot of freedom, with my particular character, that was not the case. Kenny was very, very specific with me on how I play Diana. And he would tell me where to look and how long to stare and go to the left of the camera. I think he invested a lot in the character of Diana. And so I was very directed. I always think of it a bit like Hitchcock, the way he directed his stars of his film. Everything was very, very specific. And that's how it was with Diana and my relationship with Kenny. Down to stare in this direction, the camera's going to keep coming in, don't move your eyes. And I don't think it was until the TV series where I had a lot of freedom. So probably a lot of those stares had to do with the direction.
well, it had to be kind of a power play too, in a way. These are the primary characters that
Totally.
are trying to position themselves in power, and you are.
And I had the most power. I mean, there were times when it looked a bit precarious, but I mean, I always thought of myself as having the most power. And I think those stares were part of that power. That no one was going to stare me down. No one, you know.
Well, it was brilliant. Well done.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Next question. I guess we're doing questions up here. Okay.
Hi. Thank you for being here. Can you talk a little bit about what drew you to the roles initially? Was it more like the sci-fi side or some of the more serious allegorical aspects, and what you knew about your roles when you were auditioning?
We can start with, you start down and we can work our way down. Mark?
Work our way down this
Yeah,
way?
sure.
I don't know, I never got a chance to audition. I went in to meet I prepared my role. Ken Johnson had seen me in some work previously, so he had asked me to come in. I came in and I went to through the standard process of meeting people and saying hello. And he said, come to the studio. I want you to read for the executives, which is standard. You usually go into a large room and there are anywhere from 12 to 20 executives sitting around there, and you stand like a gladiator in the middle of them, and you do whatever it is you do, and then you walk out and they say all sorts of things which clearly indicate they have no right to hold the jobs they do. In this case, I walked into a room that was about the size of a broom closet, and there was Ken Johnson and Brandon Tartikoff, who was the head of the studio at that time, or the network, head of the network at that time, and they were cloistered in a little room that had like file cabinets all jammed up against it, and there was somebody else in the room too who I don't remember, and I came in and I was like, oh my God, what are we doing in here? Who's making the phone call? And then we all got together, and Ken Johnson said, this is Mark Singer. Hey, this is Brandon. Say hi to Brandon. Hi, how are you, Brandon? I see you. And he said, okay, here. He said, now watch. Here we go. And he handed me, I had memorized all my parts. So he had the script like this, and he said, okay, I'll read with him. And Brandon Tartikoff was like this, like next to me, and I'm like, okay, here we go. And he said, oh, Mike Donovan, so at last we have you captured. What do you think about this? And I went like this. And then Kenny Johnson would go, and then he says, oh yeah, well watch this. I'll get out of this somehow. Watch this, I'll show you this. Ha 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 ha. He said, and then he goes, and then watch. And he goes, aha, Mike Donovan. Well, maybe that's what you think, but watch this. We've got you in a corner now. And then I would go, and he'd go, and then he says, oh no. And then he did this for the entire audition, right? And then when the scene was over, he shoved me out the door saying, isn't he good? And he shoved me out the door, and that was my audition. So don't talk to me about metaphors. That was a metaphor for what the hell am I doing here?
Oh, we probably all have our stories, don't we? I mean, just to preface that's a great story, Mark. And I just think auditioning is, you probably hear all the time, actors have to audition. That's one of the parts of our job. And it's definitely the most terrifying. For me, it's the most difficult part of the job, especially when you walk in a room with all the executives. And anyway, with this particular job, I was flown out to LA. I was working on a show called The Doctors, which was a soap opera at the time. And they flew me out to audition for this. I think they had already started filming, and they still hadn't cast this role. They'd seen hundreds of people for the role. And when I got there, I was told to go to a hotel. So I'm like, okay. So I went into a hotel room, and there was, maybe 6 to 8 people in the hotel room. And I memorized it. I was really scared, because whenever I want something, I get really scared. And I did my audition. I didn't think I was amazing. And then I got back to the hotel, and a little note was put under my door, and it said, "Don't leave town." And I was like, oh my God, don't leave town! And I literally couldn't sleep all night. I was so excited. And then the next day I was in Prosthetics, and that was it. So that was probably one of the easiest jobs I ever got. And that's my story. What about you?
Well, Phyllis Huffman, I believe, was the casting director. And Phyllis Huffman was married to David Huffman, who was a wonderful actor. And he's gone now, but if you ever seen the Sylvester Stallone film after Rocky? It's called Fist of the Unions in the 1930s. He's the star with Sylvester in that. And I knew David, and so I knew Phyllis both socially, but I'd never been up for a part with her before. But she sent me up, and she made a big point of getting me in. And my thing was, you see the word alien, you go, how do I approach this? I mean, you know, what do I do? And I said it to Kenny, I just went in real honest. I said, what do you want? I don't have a clue, you know. I'd love to be in this. I think it sounds very imaginative. And television was a new thing for me. I was a movie guy all through the 70s. And you guys remember in those days, you were movies or you were TV. There was Travolta sort of broke the door open, going from Welcome Back Kotter to Saturday Night Fever. But you know, even your agent might have more power in television or might have more power in movies than the other. And so television was a new experience for me. And I was real honest with Kenny, and Kenny said 2 words, Robert. He goes, Gene Wilder. And so I think because I said I didn't have a clue, Kenny became a kind of cut to the chase director for me. And sometimes that shorthand works for actors. We don't always have to dig deep, you know, and make ourselves sick to the stomach when we act. Sometimes we like being told, like an image will ring a bell for us like that, or another actor's name. And he said Gene Wilder, and I kind of channeled Gene Wilder, but not young Frankenstein Gene Wilder, or the producer's Gene Wilder, but a kind of gentle, almost romantic lead that Gene Wilder had been with Margot Kidder in a movie called Quacks Her Fortune, Has a Cousin Living in the Bronx. And I also knew that Gene Wilder had done Billy Bibbit in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest on stage with Gene Wilder. I mean, with Kirk Douglas as McMurphy off Broadway. And I'd done Billy Bibbit in the theater. So I thought, oh, Kenny's smart, because I played this famous role that Gene Wilder was discovered doing, which got him Bonnie and Clyde. And so I said, oh, okay. And I just had seen this movie where he was kind of a romantic lead. And, you know, Gene was very successful with women. We don't think of him that way, but he was quite a ladies' man. And so I sort of took that aspect of his innocence and sort of channeled it. And that's how I got the part, you know, using another actor's imagery, you know, kind of flowing it through my own juices.
That is so interesting. I never knew that. And now that I think back on your character, I completely can see that.
It's very true.
It's really interesting. Yeah.
You have to make it your own.
Yeah.
You know, but
Yeah.
you can be influenced, you know.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Next question.
Well, to continue along that line, because that actually was going to be my question, was based on your previous experience before going into this role, that's how you got those roles. What did you bring from your previous experiences into the characters to make these characters your own?
I'll start. What I learned on V, and I'd done 15 movies when I did V, but what I learned on V, I learned how to listen for the first time. And I was also watching Faye Grant one day, and it used to drive, I think it drove Mark a little crazy sometimes. Faye would hide a bit from the camera. Faye had been in like 3 series in a row, I think, and she knew that the camera was on her too much. And Faye would hide a little bit from the camera, and she would reveal from coming out of profile or doing some business or something, she would reveal when she wanted them to cut to her close, or when she wanted to, and I'd never seen an actress do that. And it's a TV technique more than a feature film technique. But that was my big thing, was learning learning a kind of a television style and some of that stuff. I learned how to listen. I learned not to tap into my natural energy always, you know, to withhold. And I also had that lesson from Faye about sometimes hiding from the camera, and then, you know, kind of pivoting into when you wanted them to really be, wanted to underline a line.
Well, I, was, had come from television. I was doing television. I'd done some theater, and then went right into soap operas. And I was sort of the commercial queen, you know, at that point in New York. I had done like 100 commercials with, you know, O.J. Simpson and, oh my God, did I say that name? But, I was just doing everything, like X Bras, and I was coming from that and soap operas. So for me, it was a different situation where I was suddenly thrust into, because like Robert said, everything was kind of, you know, dissected. You either were a nighttime television actress, a daytime television actress, or you were a movie actress. They didn't kind of blend. So I was a daytime television actress, desperate to be a nighttime television actress. And so when I got this job, I was suddenly in nighttime television, and it was so huge for me that all I wanted to do was be the good girl and just listen. And like I said, Kenny took me under his wing and developed me. I really feel like, you know, because of him, that character developed into the iconic character it was. And once I had my wings, I was able to fly with it. So it was just the most extraordinary opportunity for me.
Wow, that's all that stuff's interesting.
Yeah, none of us knew.
I had come to V after doing a film called The Beastmaster. So there was a particular mindset. There is a particular mindset when you play iconic, heroic characters. We've had them, they're the characters of myth all the way back through the Battle of Troy and even before then. So there's a kind of a historic underpinning on the one hand, and there's an expectation of what heroes are supposed to be like on the other, but there's also a kind of a more, and then through the years, you know, we see all of these characters. We see the evil sorceress, and we see the innocent, and we see the hero, and we see all these different people, the ingenue. We see them all repeated in different forms throughout all drama, throughout all comedy, all that sort of stuff. So when I came to V, what I brought to it that I thought was actually valuable was the idea that I was going to do as many of my own stunts as possible. I was going to be the analog of all the people that I saw being phased out of movie making by CGI. If somebody was going to fall off a building onto something, that was going to be me if I could do it and survive. If somebody was going to be in the middle of an explosion or close enough to it so that you could recognize that it was the actual actor who was there, it was going to be me. If somebody was going to, I was telling somebody about a fight that Michael Ironside and I had in V. We fought across a pickup truck, up and down and over a pickup truck and so forth. That was a fight that I particularly am proud of because I choreographed that from beginning to end. And I did it with 3 broken ribs because the night before, a guy had missed his cue in a very simple stunt that I choreographed, and he'd broken a few of my ribs. So then, you know, but for me, that was something that was an opportunity, and I think a lot of younger actors feel that way too. And although you do pay a price for it, on the other hand, it sort of adds an authenticity and a zest to being there on the set every day and to what you hope comes across the screen to everybody else. So our mirroring life, blah, blah, blah. What a pleasure. See you all. I'm ordering pizza. We'll see you.
Well, speaking of stunts and you know, coming off Beastmaster, Mark was sort of surrounded. All the stunt guys wanted to hang out with Mark. You know? Balance of guys coming on the sound stage because he was always doing all the action. But I had to do a stunt. We were out by Santa Anita. We were out there when they filmed the Invasion of the Body Snatchers. If you guys, I think Mark was out there that day. But I had to pull up with Ironside in a van, and we had to open the sliding side door and grab a stormtrooper and pull him in, slam the door and pull up. Well, we did perfect for 3 takes, and now I couldn't believe we were still doing it. And we put a furniture blanket in the back to make it a little easier on the actor playing the stormtrooper, the stunt, you know. And we had a stunt driver, and on the 4th take, and apparently our guest director was rushing because he had something to do that night. On the fourth take, somebody told the stunt driver to go into fourth gear. And we were used to first, second, third gear, and what that feels like in the back of a van on a furniture blanket. When he went into fourth gear, we rammed up against the back of the front seat, and I flew out the back. I hit the armatures on the two doors, and I flew out onto the street at 40 miles an hour. Ironside picked me up, would not let them take me to an emergency room, because if you know Mike, you know he's got that scar. He was sewn up by an Eskimo with a whale bone. I think he really was he was an activist up in Canada. I think he got hurt and he was doing a protest at a Native American reservation up in Canada. So Mike knew that when you take your children to an emergency room and just a regular doctor sews you up, it's like this. But if you have a plastic surgeon sew you up, it's like this, and it heals. And this is our fortune. Our faces are our fortune. Anyway, he took me to Michael Jackson's doctor in Pasadena. And it was a Friday afternoon, and they poured me 3 fingers of JB on the rocks. Gave me a shot, stitched me up. On Saturday, I looked like the Elephant Man. On Sunday, I looked like the Elephant Man's brother. I thought I would never work again, and 10 days later, I was healed. Rubbed aloe vera on it every night, watching Johnny Carson. They could put makeup over, and I was back to work in 10 days. But Ironside saved me by taking me to that plastic surgeon. You know, and I thought I was going to have to learn how to direct.
We have one last question.
Yeah.
This is for Chadwick. Thank you for being here. One of your co-stars, June Chadwick, who played Renuion, always sounded Australian to me. And I thought I remember reading some years after the show had ended, and after Mission Impossible, that you had moved to Australia. And I was always wondering what that was all about. Was there any connection to June Chadwick?
So you want to know how Australian connection, how that happened, and my relationship with June Chadwick?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, you know, June and I totally love each other. We really do. But while we were doing the, I think, you know, we were young, slightly insecure actors at the time when we were doing the show, and I think we kind of lived our roles a little bit. You know, we were constantly trying to one-upmanship the other, and it kind of carried a little bit into our personal lives. And I don't know, I can't say that it was method acting, but somehow that was our relationship. We had a lot of love, but we were also kind of constantly trying to kind of win. I've been in touch with June over the years, and she's just a beautiful lady, and she, I don't know if she does too much in the business anymore, but we still catch up from time to time. And I was doing Mission Impossible, the TV show, and I went to Australia to do that for 6 months in Melbourne. And I was a very ambitious actress. I never thought that a man would steer me away from my career. But God knows I fell madly in love with an Aussie. And I left LA, and my agent didn't talk to me again, ever. He still won't talk to me. If he's still around, I don't know. But so I left thinking, oh, this won't be a problem. I'll just work, in Australia. But 30 years ago, it was really, Australia didn't have a lot of work for Americans. Although the American industry did come there, and I did get and do a lot of guest stars. But that's where I've lived ever since. And now my children have grown. They live in America. I've got one in New York, one in LA, pursuing creative things. And I'm now back auditioning again. I've got an agent and a manager again here. So life does turn around, and it's been a great odyssey. Yeah.
What do you have going on right now?
Well, my voice is shot from doing this stupid Freddy laugh for all you fans. I cleared my calendar for July to experiment with something new. I'm going to be hosting a show for the Travel Channel, the National Geographic and the History Channel and Discovery and Travel Channel. They're all under the same umbrella. I think William Shatner's doing one of those shows now. And they approached me to host and to narrate a show that's about, they've gone through archives of newspapers all over the U.S. and they found really strange, dark, occult occurrences, but these aren't urban legends and they're not myths. They're actually documented with journalistic sources, true sources, who, what, when, where, why, and how. And they're in newspapers. So you'll see the original article from 1865 or something. But they're really strange things. People were buried alive, things like that really happened. And I'm anxious to do it. I've read the first 3, and I'm really happy with it. I'm excited, but I'm dog-meat because I've been on the road. I didn't do any of them in July. We all know what this is like. Your show gets pushed, and you're all ready to go. You go to the gym, you eat your vegetables. You don't drink as much wine, and then boom, they push it. It just happened to the wonderful actor Robert Patrick, who's actually a Terminator. Robert got all buff. He's playing an ex-high school athlete who disappointed his team, and 30 years later he goes to college, and he's 50, but he's going to try out for the local college football team. And Robert got completely buff, ready. He was at the gym for 6 months. He had a personal trainer, eating his vegetables, and then they pushed him. So now he's like, all he can do is eat kale and smile. So I'm going to go home and sleep and binge Mindhunter until Thursday. And go up to Hot LA and do my new show. True talent.
Mark, what are you looking at? I just completed playing Macbeth in the Southern Shakespeare Festival's production of that down in Tallahassee, which just missed, there was a hurricane just missed. And I'm going to be in October playing the title character in a play that I wrote called Gary's Place about Alzheimer's. And you can also see me as a guest star on RuPaul's new series, AJ and the Queen. It was a lovely experience working with him. I didn't know what to expect, but like so many things, you're so surprised, and I think always humblingly and pleasantly. He's just a wonderful guy, just a terrific guy. So a lot of fun to be with him. But anyway, that's what I'm doing these days.
If you haven't seen Mark on stage, I come from the theater, and my friends and I had seen Mark up at ACT, Taming of the Shrew, and literally, it was that production, and Mark's humble about this, but those in the know back in the day knew that production, and still talked about, was one of the greatest productions of Taming of Shrew done on the American stage, period. And I remember seeing that, and it was like seeing the famous Peter Brook Midsummer's Night's Dream. It was just a revelation. It was such a great production. So if you haven't seen Mr. Singer on stage, you're in for a treat.
Oh, I just want to say one more thing. Another one was going to be but if you are home on Thursday night, I'm on a show called Reef Break. I play a police chief, and I'm on the last 2 episodes. I have a reoccurring role. So if you are happy to be home and you want to see me as a police chief, do watch. But I give it a little push to show. It's a new show on ABC. Anyway, that's it.
So this is the last panel, the last key panel. It is again. Warner Brother Archive was nice enough to donate a copy of the new Blu-ray release of the miniseries. It's remastered. Basically, we'll do a little trivia here, and you're going to have to let me finish the question, because last time I didn't get a chance to finish the question. So you have to let me finish the question before you shoot up your hand. Our visitors that are guarding.
But before you ask the question,
okay.
or Robert, nor Jane, nor I will have a peaceful moment from Kenny Johnson.
Okay.
You have to, since you understand this quite clearly, and Robert, I know you do too, you have to explain the reformatting of it, because that's what's so special, I think, about this Blu-ray edition.
Okay, so the series was shot with the intention that overseas, and this happened a lot with television series shot in the United States, that overseas they play theatrically. So you had to shoot with the mindset that the aspect ratio would be different. So at home, it's a 4:3 aspect ratio in your televisions in the 80s at the time. And to be able to project that theatrically, it would have to be cropped or hard matted. And so you had to shoot with the mindset that the real estate that's being utilized, the action had to be contained within a hard matted version, which would be what we consider kind of a 16:9 or widescreen. Actually, it was 166, and then it was one. Okay. I'm not going to get into the technical stuff.
Does it mean my nose is bigger?
Yes. Yeah. So anyway, it'd be hard matted, so it'd be shot that way. Well, the version that I guess how he intended as he was shooting it, that theatrical presentation is what this version contains. So it is preserving an aspect ratio that you would have experienced theatrically, giving it a bit more of a cinematic experience versus your standard television miniseries.
Let me just say one more thing about that. The first time that we all saw we saw it in, I forget what theater it was, but it was a great, big, beautiful, cinemascopic theater. And we'd all been working on this thing, and if my experience mirrors anybody else's, we were all veteran actors, as you hear by the resumes that we represented here earlier. We were all veteran actors, so we came in and we said, okay, it's going to be it's going to be this big sci-fi thing. And we walked into the place was packed, and there was a gigantic screen. And when this thing came on the screen, all of us were drop-jawed. We were just agog. So this is that original experience as close as you can see it.
So pop it on the 50-inch in the man cave.
Right. All right, so here's our question.
She shed?
All right, so our question is, wait for it, all right, okay. Where was Sean Donovan stored in the visitor mothership? Oh, come on, you gotta let me finish. Disqualified. No. All right, on 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay. So,
Section 31.
Visitors? Correct. All right, on behalf of DragonCon, I'd like to thank our guests again. Can we give them a round of applause? Thank you all.